Welcome to uARFIDwhatueat, a channel where we deal with some of the issues that somebody with avoidant restrictive food intake disorder deals with on a daily basis. My name is Chris. So today, and for the next two episodes following this, we're going to be taking a bit of a break from our regularly scheduled programming to instead take a little detour here to talk about my own personal likes and dislikes when it comes to tastes, textures, and smells. Today we're going to be talking about taste, and I'm going to be splitting these adjectives for tastes into tier rankings. So I'll have A, which is tasty, I like it, a positive, B, which is semi-positive, mostly positive. I'll have C, which is like a neutral flavor. I'll have D, which is flavors that I tend to skew a little negative about, but I can find some positive in them. And then I'll have F, which is bottom of the barrel flavors I don't like, can't stand. I've got my handy list here of all the flavor adjectives, so I'm just gonna go down it, and yeah, we're gonna see what happens here. So let's begin. Number one for taste, we have fruity. I find fruity to be a decent taste. Not always perfect, it can be a little overpowering sometimes. Generally when I think of fruity, I think of something kind of sweet, kind of light, bright. There are, however, plenty of fruity flavors I really don't like, so that keeps it out of the A tier. We're gonna put fruity under B. Number two, we have bitter. Bitter flavors I don't tend to enjoy in general. They are way too strong for me. They tend to be a bit of a punch in the face, so I generally try to avoid bitter flavors, and I would put those comfortably into the F tier. For three, we have spicy. For the most part, I would say I don't usually like spices. They can be a little too much for me usually. But on the other hand, I do like when a spice has a little bit of a kick to it as far as like heat goes. So a lot of flavors I don't like, but in the last year or two, I feel like I've come around to the idea that maybe one of the few things I can try and backdoor my way into enjoying foods with is like spicy, hot flavors. I don't mind heat, actually, to my surprise. I was always afraid of it for the most part, and there are still plenty of spicy foods that I can't tolerate. That's something I'm kind of coming around to, so for that reason, spicy, where maybe once you would have ended up in D, I'm gonna put you in C. Nice neutral tier. Number four, we have nutty. Nutty is a flavor I don't like. Just outright. It's not one I enjoy, tends to be kind of dull and gross, a little musty kind of. So for that reason, we are going to be putting nutty into the D tier. Number five, we have cheesy. I do like a lot of cheeses, I have to admit, but I can definitely say that some cheeses are just too darn cheesy. I tend to prefer lighter cheeses without a lot of flavor to them, or if they have a bit of flavor, just a little bit of a kick to it, not a lot at all. But I find cheese can be a helpful addition to many foods. So for the fact that I do really enjoy it when I do enjoy it, but can be off-put by it if the cheese isn't my kind of thing, we're gonna throw that into the B tier. Number six, we have woody. When I think of like a woody flavor, I think of kind of like something that evokes that feeling of literally just going outside and biting into a stick, or like a barky kind of flavor. Yeah, that's not for me. So we're gonna go ahead and put woody into a D tier for taste. Number seven, we have burnt. Generally speaking, I don't tend to like burnt flavors. I suppose there are people out there who do, but I'm not really into things that tend to taste burnt. But I do like when something's toasty and a little on the burn side. Not a lot, not like so it's, you know, charred black, but say you're having a slice of toast or something. You got a nice little brown kind of toast on that, just a nice golden brown. That's something I can really go for. So for that reason, since it can edge right on like charred to burnt, I'm gonna throw burnt into the D tier. For number eight, we have minty. I do actually tend to enjoy minty flavors. I think of like, I don't know, like minty gum or mint ice cream or those little after eight chocolates that you can get. It's got a nice refreshing quality to it that I tend to like, and it doesn't tend to be too overpowering. Doesn't mean I love it. Not every minty food is for me, so I'm gonna throw that into the B tier. For number nine, we have Tart. Tart makes me think of like apple or certain kinds of jams. I don't tend to be a jam guy, and I don't really tend to be an apple guy most of the time either. But it's not the most offensive flavor in the world. It's kind of a below neutral. I'm gonna throw it into the D tier. For 10, we have fishy. I do not like the taste of fish at all. Makes me sick. The smell of fish makes me sick. So we're gonna bury that as deep into the F tier as we possibly can. Absolutely one of my fear foods. Big time F. For 11, we have salty. I have to say that salty is one of my favorite tastes. You can absolutely overdo salt. Like salt can ruin a meal if you go crazy on it, but if you put just the right amount of salt on something, it enhances almost every single meal that it goes on. Big fan of salt, to my own detriment probably. A lot of foods I eat probably have way too much salt in them. And people with ARFID will often eat a lot of processed foods, which often tends to be very salty. But even with that acknowledged, I love it. Salt's gonna have to go into A tier. For 12, we have bittersweet. I don't really tend to like bitter, but I do like sweetness, so it kind of takes the edge off of bitter just a little bit. Because it is bitter, but technically has some sweetness to it, I'm gonna throw it into D tier. For 13, we have tangy. When it comes to tangy, I think of like certain like salad dressing or like orange juice kind of thing. It's a bit of a sharp flavor. so I don't really tend to like it too much. I'm gonna put Tangy into D tier. For 14, I have Planty. You won't usually find foods described as Planty, but when I eat things like vegetables, for me, it just makes me think Planty. That's the word that goes into my head. The kind of green, grassy flavors. Not a flavor I like at all. I find it kind of gross. I can handle it, so it's not going to go right into the F tier, but it's not something I look for in any meal I eat, basically. So we're going to throw that into the D tier. For 15, we have sweet. Sweet is a flavor I do, generally speaking, like. Again, when you have ARFID, you're eating a lot of processed foods a lot of the time, and you tend to like lean towards junk food, candy, things like that. So sweet can be your friend in a lot of ways. It can be too much, of course. Nobody wants overtly sweet. You don't want to punch in the face of it. But just the right amount of sweet can be delicious. So sweet, you're going into the A tier. For 16, we have hoppy. So when I think of hoppy, I tend to think of like kind of like a heavy beer. Kind of has a yeasty quality to it, but not quite. A dull but noticeable flavor. I don't tend to mind it. I don't get excited about it, but I can live with it. Hoppy, you're gonna go firmly into the C tier. For 17, we have umami. And this one's kind of interesting here because I don't tend to like meat. That's kind of what I think of when I think of umami. So I want to say outright that I don't like it, but I do like certain aspects at times. Like I like soy sauce, for example. That's a flavor I really go for, and that's described as umami. So to that end, umami escapes the F and goes into the D tier. For 18, we have buttery. Buttery, generally speaking, is a great flavor, tends to be really good, but it's easily overdone. If something is just drenched in butter, it gets kind of oily and gross, but just the right amount of butter can be delicious. Because I do feel it is easy to overdo butter, I'm gonna put it into the B tier, but butter, please don't take that personally. We're good pals, I love you. For 19, we have earthy. When I think of earthy, I think of flavors that kind of have like a dirt kind of taste to them a little bit. Very just freshly ripped out of the ground kind of flavor. Generally speaking, not a flavor I tend to like. Not outright offensive, thankfully, but not a great flavor. So we're gonna go ahead and just toss that into the D tier. For 20, we have yeasty. So we're talking like a bread flavor, maybe like a slight touch of sweetness to it. A flavor I tend to like. I love bread. Breads are often a safe food for me, but there's tons of breads I also don't like. Whole wheats or one of those grained breads. I don't like that. So because yeasty can be delicious, but it isn't always, I'm gonna go and put that into the B tier. For 21, we have sour. Most of my experience with sour tends to come from like candies, I'm not gonna lie. You'll notice I have to use candy and junk food for reference a lot here because I just haven't tried a lot of foods. But yeah, from my experience with sour, I don't really tend to like it. It's a little strong for me, a little too much, and my taste buds just can't handle it. So I'm not gonna throw that into the F tier outright because it's not disgusting, but it's just a little strong for me. So we're gonna put that fella into the D tier. For 22, I have acidic. When I think of acidic, I think of like vinegary, sharp, a strong flavor. And I generally try to avoid strong flavors. They're too much for me usually. But the acidity in itself isn't a killer to a meal if it's done ever so slightly and ever so correctly. But I don't really think it tends to make a meal better either. So I'm gonna throw acidic into the D tier. 23, we have rancid. To be fair, most people probably aren't that into a rancid flavor, but there are some folks that get into that kind of thing. I definitely don't. Grosses me the heck out. So we're just gonna throw rancid into the F tier, right down with fishy. Very gross. 24, we have savory. Now savory and umami have a bit of an interaction here, especially from what I've read online. I was trying to figure out whether or not I should include both of these, but from what I've read, it does seem to be that like savory tends to lean more into the like saltier, meatier kind of flavor, whereas umami tends to kind of have more of a complex sweetness kind of mixed in. Wouldn't say I'm a fan of either, but I feel like in the right context, savory can be a flavor that works. I feel like garlic kind of has like a savory-ish quality to it, and I like garlic in the right circumstances. So I don't want to just toss savory right off the cliff here. I think I'm just going to group it in with umami there and just give it a nice old D ranking. And last but not least, at 25, we have citrusy. Citrusy flavors tend to be kind of strong and a bit of a punch, so I don't want to go too far into saying I like them, but just right. Like I like a bit of lime, I like a touch of lemon, like the most teensy touch of lemon, but generally speaking they are too strong. But because they can meet in the middle sometimes, I'm going to put them into the C tier. Alright folks, so that is 25 tastes ranked. You're sure to notice that the F tier and the D tier tend to win out a lot more than the other ones. And suffice to say, this isn't like a completely comprehensive perfect list of all conceivable flavors, and it should be noted for all of these flavors that it comes down to context in a lot of ways. If it's too salty, then it can drop from A tier to B tier to C tier. It can ruin a meal if it's too salty. That's why I tend to prefer food that has some flavor but tends to lean towards the blander side. But yeah, this is my taste tier list. The next video will be the same thing, except we're going to be talking about textures this time. So if you enjoyed this or you found this interesting at all, hopefully you'll come back and check the next one out with me. This is uARFIDwhatueat. My name is Chris. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll come back next time to see the texture version of this video. But until then, I hope you have a great day. Take care, and thanks again. Bye-bye.